All right, we are going to go ahead and get started with part 2 of the MICIP 101. If you were either not here for part 1 or if you closed your web browser, we wanted to give everybody the opportunity to get our dashboard back open. And so the way to get to our dashboard is at that bit.ly, the bit.ly/23 MICIP 101. So you'll want to have that open. We have a lot of resources in there that we're going to go over this afternoon, just like we did in the morning. And also wanted to give everybody just a minute to reattach to our Slido. If you happen to get out of the Slido, you can either take a quick snap of that QR code and get that way, or if you're in the dashboard, you can just click the slido.com link that's there. So I'm going to give just everybody just a minute to reattach and reestablish those resources. All right, Frank, we're ready for the presentation, please.
Thank you, sir. Okay, good. Okay, cool. All right, welcome back. Thank you for coming back, first of all. Hilda Irani, I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for the Dearborn Public Schools, so I have the honor of working with Frank Coles, Dr. Dave Hunt, and Mike Fine from all over the state, I feel like, and we've collaborated together with our common goal of understanding MICIP and trying to disseminate that information into chunks that are accessible to everyone. And just know, honestly, this is just small pieces, and then you just digest and you move forward, and a lot of content is gonna get thrown at you today. That's okay. Just know where you can always go back to that dashboard. You can find resources. You'll find video clips from us from last year and the year before. We've got it all there to help you, on your journey as you learn continuous improvement. So continuing from where Frank left off this morning, we are now going into steps 9 through 14. So this is where we actually start developing our goal. This is where we're going to be talking about those checkpoints along the way, those interim and end targets. We'll talk about the actual work that happens at the district and at the building level through our strategies and then into our activities. And then can't forget about the money. How are you going to pay for all of this? We'll get into the funding sources. And then how you will communicate this to your stakeholders. So I'll quickly go through all of those. So let's talk a little bit about defining what a goal looks like. One thing to think about when you are writing your goal statement is one data story ends up being one goal. And I think we touched on that this morning. Just be mindful of that. So with that initial data story and the process that you've gone through, assessing your needs, developing that challenge statement, when you get to the goal part, you have to recognize that there's a whole other piece to it. It's gonna have to get monitored, it's gonna have to get evaluated. There's a lot more that happens than just like, this is our goal, we're done. This is not assist. So the number of goals you choose really impacts the amount of investment and work you're doing, and in terms of hours, in terms of implementation. And so I know one of the questions that popped up on Slido was, we're thinking about 3-4 goals. Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? We're not here to say whether that's a good or every district is unique in their needs. But I'll speak personally from Dearborn because that's where I come from. Know that less is more. The more you invest into that goal, the more well-developed it is. I feel the stronger it is. If you spread yourself thin with multiple goals, it just gets harder to implement with fidelity. So that's just a personal experience. Again, what works for you can be definitely something that's, what applies to what your district needs. So make sure you're always thinking about what your district priorities are, and going back to the flow charts that I think, was it Mike? You clicked on those, right, earlier? That Mike shared. Great resource for you to be thinking about with just various examples. And then hopefully we'll have time, we'll go into the Dearborn MICIP plan just, again, as an example. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. It's far from it. We're constantly tweaking and evolving and improving upon it. But you can see how we took one systems goal and then how we evolved from there. Do you want to? Thank you. So how do you write this goal? When Dave introduced us to MICIP, and I'm going to give him credit because it was, I think, during COVID, and we were on these bi-weekly sessions of us delving into what the platform looked like, he compared it to TurboTax. And so that's kind of always been in the back of my head. The box will pop up. It's time to write your one-sentence goal. And I know many of us here are trained when we write a goal, whether it's an evaluation goal, a building SIP goal, what have you, is we use the SMART acronym, right? We're making sure that our goal has a name, of course. It's got to be specific. It's got to be measurable. It's got to be attainable, right? We got to be able to accomplish it. It has to be relevant. It has to apply to the current situation at hand. And there needs to be some sort of a timing or time-bound piece to it. The questions will take you through this. So normally when we write our goal, we'd want to encompass all of this. That's not how MICIP is set up. It chunks it for you. So first of all, it'll have you write the goal in the first box there where it says goal summary. So you're going to name it. The name of the goal is kind of like an abbreviated name. When you go to do your portfolio and you actually want to reference it and get the whole point, it'll give you like a header for the name of your goal. So, for us, it's like MTSS, academic strategies, or whatever you're going to be calling it. So it's a quick summary of what that goal is called. That'll go in there. You kind of want to have a long-term, 2, 3, 4, 5-year range of how long it's going to take you to accomplish that. That's where you'll put your due date. Some goals could be shorter range. Most, though, will take a couple of years to accomplish. We know that realistically that's where we're at. So let's dig a little bit into what a SMART goal looks like. And thanks to Mike, we've got a little bit more elaboration there because we connected it back to MICIP. So when we think about how it's, S is strategic, thinking of it in terms of a system, all the students within the district, how this will apply to them and how it'll be relevant. It's got to be measurable. We know that, right? So what data are you going to use? Go back to the data points that you selected for your data story and how those are going to apply into, and making sure you're thinking long term. So what worked last year, do we need to update and add additional data points to help keep the goal relevant? Is it attainable? Let's be realistic. Will we have the funds to make this happen? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the resources? What will we do to make sure that this is the goal that we need? And, do we have, if we need to make adjustments, will there be grant funding sources? You'll see all of those as options. R is it's got to be results driven. What will be the outcome? Can we show what will come out of this? Is there data, collection? Are we going to have an increase in achievement scores? Will we have an improvement in discipline data? What is it that we'll have that will monitor that this is working or not working, and what adjustments can we make? And then finally, like I mentioned earlier, that 3 to 5 year mark is usually where we need to be to ensure that it's working or not. And then again, do we scrap the whole thing? Do we make adjustments? What is our choices? All right, so I mentioned this a minute ago. This really, I think, is where you get the biggest bang for your buck because we're thinking about end targets and interim targets. These are the checkpoints. Think of them as when you're on the highway, when you were driving here, that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour drive. This is the rest points where you're checking in. Is this working? What can we do? How do we know we're going to get there? We don't wait until the end to verify that our goal has worked or not. So with an end target there, you've got 2 examples. I'll give you a second to read them. So this would be at the end of maybe possibly 1 year. Again, not the full 3 to 5 year. So the example we see there is looking at school climate survey that they gave, and we're looking for a measurable growth in that survey. Interim targets are smaller checkpoints that we would go through along the way to ensure that, do we need to make tweaks? A lot of time perception survey data will help us here. Maybe it's a formative assessment. Maybe it's a classroom assessment that the buildings need to give. Something that we need to do to ensure that we're on the right path. Tasks are really like the actions, like small little things, and tasks are optional. With a task, you're just trying to make sure that, is it working? I can give this maybe to a specific building. I can give this to a specific grade level per se, depending on the size of your district. Again, tasks are going to make sure that they're optional, but you would have that choice on the screen there to be able to add that on there to, again, monitoring, and making sure that we have what we need to do to be successful.
Hilda, can I add a couple
Please
of
go
things?
ahead.
Back when we were talking about the data that you might upload into the system, and we were talking about the
yeah.
data stories, I had mentioned that any of the data that you upload, if anything that you want to, later in your process, to be able to want to show improvement on it, that you needed to upload the data at that point. And this is the part in the process that comes back. So all the way back to the data story at the very beginning, when you're deciding what data are we going to use and what are we going to upload and how much do we have to put in there. This is where you might get here and say, oh, well, we want to see improvement on, in this case, a survey. Well, if you didn't upload the survey, you wouldn't have a data object to connect it to, so you'd have to kind of go back to that step and then put that piece of data in. So this is, just wanted to point out that this morning when I mentioned later it'll be important to know what data you uploaded because you need to connect it to something. This is the thing that you need to connect it to.
And one of the questions I think that came out on the Slido is how do you know what to upload? And I know we shared that great table with you. It's okay if you upload something and you don't end up using it. Like, don't feel like, again, like there's this data police that's checking. But to what Dave just said, if that piece is not there, then you're stuck. So you do want to make sure that you are being very careful, cognizant of what you need, and you always, always have the option to go back. No submit button. There's no like, oh, I didn't do it from the start, we got to start over. No, you just go back to the data story and you upload that piece, and then you can be able to connect it to where you need it to be. Okay, so there's a lot of flexibility in that sense, which is nice.
Hilda, can I make
Yeah.
one other mention? Frank, could you go back one slide? Sorry, one more. So Hilda talked about SMART goals, and I think we're all used to writing SMART goals where we say we want to see this kind of improvement in this amount of time and on this specific measure. But our goals are really written to be broad, especially if they're systems goals. And so you wouldn't probably want to say in your goal something like, I want to see the ELA improved 5% by next year, right? We want to make bigger goals. I hate to use an example, but you might want to just say something more like, we want to see our academics, the student academic success improve. And then you get into the actual measurable and time-bound pieces when you write your end targets and your interim targets.
Yep. So
even the example that MICIP gives here is not one that I would personally use.
yeah, that can be very confusing. You're right.
Because if you're writing a broader systems goal about academic achievement improving, then you're really going to get into the details of that when you make your end targets and interim targets. So I hope that makes sense, and maybe when we are able to get into the Dearborn example, Hilda can point
Yeah, the
out
more
those.
broad you are, the more functional, thanks Mike, the more options you're giving yourself. You're not restricting yourself. I feel something like this, you're sort of like, okay, we're stuck. It has to be this, and this is where we're going. All right. I think we skipped. No, yes, right here. All right. So let's actually go in and plug in our end targets and interim targets. So when we're thinking about your end target, it's really where the very specifics, like Dave just said, about where you want to be by the end of the goal. This is where you're going to plug in the date, of course. You're looking for the measure that you're going to be using, so what data piece. And so when you see add measure there at the top, that's where it would connected to what you had previously in your data story. You'll have the option of either being quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative, of course, is very number-based from X to Y. You're really just making those chunks. Sometimes that works. Qualitative gives you a little bit more flexibility because then it's more open. You're able to elaborate more and then really make that end target yours in terms of what you hope to accomplish by the end. But you do have the option there. So if you'll notice with the quantitative screenshot we have, it's very you're either increasing in value, you're decreasing in value, you're plugging in the number, and it just pulls all those pieces together. Qualitative, I think a box will just pop open and you can actually phrase it and put it the way you'd like. Interim targets, like I mentioned before, the checkpoints, and really those little smaller pieces that you'll do, and really just thinking about what we can do to get there along the way. All right. Next one, please. And now we're into strategies, if you're ready.
So this is the screen that is here is also, and you can see, I think Frank's pointer is on it, where it shows a radio box there.
Yep.
What that would do is it would show all the different data sources that you have available to you, and then you have to connect whatever you put in there for your end target or interim targets to one of those data sources. So it makes it, there's apparently in this example there was just one data source in there.
It was a simple one.
But it would list all of the data sources that you had uploaded previously back on that.
Am I wrong, Dave? If they click add measure at the top, though, they would be able, it would probably, I think, take them back to be able to add something.
Yep. So this screen kind of enables you to go back and add some additional data if you need to.
So yeah, just know you have to have that data piece there. You can't just pick a target for the sake of picking one. All right, so now let's get into the actual work. I feel this is where, when we talk about strategies and activities, this is where you're putting your plan into action. It's what's going to happen. I'll give you a second to read the definition from the process guide. And if you want to actually go through the MICIP process guide, that's linked back on our dashboard. That was the document that the MICIP team developed and updated last year, we found out, and put on the MDE website. And what's nice about the process guide is that it goes through, along with screenshots, it gives you a nice description of every step along the way. It includes clarifying questions. It does link additional resources. But we thought that this definition hits the target of what we want. It's the specific actions that the adults are going to take. So who's going to take it? What are they going to do? How are they going to get it done? What do they need to get there? And when we think about strategies, this is where, if you'll go to the next slide, please. This is really where you start connecting all the dots. Strategies need to be research-based. So you can't just say, we're going to do this because. There's got to be some research behind it that shows that it's effective. And so all strategies need to come from one source, and that is the MyStrategy Bank. The MyStrategy Bank is connected through the MICIP platform. So as you are going through, you'll be asking yourself these questions. So it'll connect, believe you click on Add a Strategy. It takes you to a new screen that opens up in a new browser, and it takes you there, and then you can search based on keywords. So for example, in the Dearborn plan, we wanted to have something we knew related to professional learning communities. So we needed something tied to PLC. So you type in PLC or professional learning communities, you see what comes up, and then you look at the various strategies that are available to you, trying to decide, does this fit the need that we have? There are a lot of clarifying questions that you can see on the screen. So, who's going to be involved in this strategy? Does it apply to all our high schools? Maybe it's just an elementary strategy. When will we start? When will we end? All of those are all the considerations that you'll plug in after you search for your strategy. To make sure that the strategy you've chosen is the right fit, there is something known as the hexagon tool. And again, that's another box that'll pop up at the bottom of the screen as you're scrolling through the platform. And what's great about the hexagon tool is that it goes through and it helps you with that decision. Again, no MICIP police. Meaning it's okay. This is where your team is really having those valuable discussions, looking at each strategy, considering, hey, will this work? Could this not work? And then you're thinking about, I think there's 7 areas there. So you're looking at, is the evidence, does it fit our need? And it's a ranking of 1 to 5, yep. Is there usability? Will we be able to support this? Does it fit the need that we have? And then, let me see, a need, fit, and then capacity. Can we accomplish what the strategy is asking us to do? Will it fit with what we have on there? And so we could spend a whole session just on MyStrategy Bank and Hexagon tool, and we've done that in the past, so we know. But there's some great documents available to you. If you click, I think that's one of them, right? How do you specifically use that Hexagon tool to help evaluate strategies and activities? So once you make your selection, I think it says on there, included in your plan. So once you put that on there, you click, and it pops right up. You change your mind, not a problem. You can always go back, revisit, and update as needed. We can if we'd like to, yeah, if you think we have time. Okay. Frank, would you click on the link, please, for the Hexagon tool, if it works? All right, go for it. This one's yours.
So I was actually a part of this team that created this toolkit. And just for a little clarity, if you're the person leading the continuous improvement process in your district, it's there for you. It's a facilitator guide in addition to the tool. So if you're the person, I don't know what to do. I've never even seen a Hexagon tool before. It will walk you through. It gives you the information and the step-by-step directions on how to do it. If you have an ISD person that would like to lead your group because you feel like maybe an outside person would be better to lead the work, that facilitator guide is included in there as well. So most of these tools, because we try to make them statewide, you may only have 50 kids and 4 teachers, or you might have 20,000 students and 3,000 teachers. So we try to make it equitable for anybody that could use the tools that were provided for MICIP.
Thank you, sir. So yeah, all of these tools, again, we have them linked. They're on the MDE website, which I know we have on our dashboard. Very valuable. I would reference them when the need arises instead of trying to dig through everything that's there. But this one specifically on the hexagon tool, I think is pretty important. Thank you, Frank. All right, next slide. So digging a little bit more into my strategy bank, I think it's evolved, I'll be honest, and I think, gentlemen, you probably can agree with me, right? From when I remember we first started looking at this from a couple of years ago, the bank of strategies available to us has increased dramatically in terms of what, I guess, based on demand, based on need. Many of them, of course, should be research-based, and it gives you all the documentation there that goes along. But any strategy that you need to use in MICIP needs to come from here, so just remember that. If, and this has come up for us, I know that, your strategy is not there. Like you've searched, you've tried every keyword, you've tried backwards and forwards, you could not find the strategy that you need in that area, then you would reach out to your local ISD, and then they would be able to work with you to add the strategy to the bank for you. Okay, so that's something that, to keep in mind. All right, so now let's go to the next layer. So we've talked about the goal, we've talked about the strategies, now we're looking into the activities. So when you're thinking about activities, it's really what are the adults in the schools and at the district level doing? It's their direct actions, right? And the actions are going into 4 areas, right? So it's the preparation, it's that getting ready, do we have the staff needed to accomplish these strategies, to get the strategy done? Do we have the professional development that they need? So, okay, we want to put this strategy into place, but do we have the PD? Do we have the resources that we need for them to accomplish this work? And then how do we know they're doing it the right way? So is there an evaluation piece or a monitoring piece? Are there checklists? Are there some sort of a check-in that we do to make sure that what we're doing is still on track? And then finally, well, that was the monitoring, and then we will tweak along the way, and then of course, then we'll evaluate and then revisit and decide, was this the activity that we needed, or do we need to move forward and adjust? And then what does it look like on the platform? Well, the process guide gives you a breakdown of every section there, but overall, you can see the strategy details will start off the top, which I really like. It always reminds you of where you're at and which activities you're connecting to. It brings up the start and end date. It even tells you, I believe, which buildings you are including under this activity. So you've got a lot of flexibility. Dearborn, our district has close to 30 buildings, schools. So with that size of a district, we will maybe assign specific activities just to our high schools, or maybe this is something just for the elementaries. So we'll have that ability to go in and check off where that strategy and activity apply to. And then you'll see there what the activity is, who you're assigning it to, and I see Mike, it was assigned to you. When you assign it to someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the person responsible like 100%. It's just kind of like the contact person to ensure that it happened. And the system is set up to send them reminders like, hey, this is coming up soon. Double check that you're doing what you need to be doing to make sure that that activity has happened. And then you have your start and end date as well. All right, time to pay for all of this great work. So how will you fund your goal, your strategy, and activities? You will see a pretty extensive list of federal, state, and other on the screen when you get to this part of the plan. You would check off which funding sources you'll be using, whether it be a grant, whether it be Title I, whether it's state funds. And then for the total funding, I think it's, am I right, an approximate amount of what you feel you would need to accomplish that? Yeah, it's a planning sheet. Again, you're not going to be held to it. This is not like an invoice that's going to be coming to your business services office that have to pay in a couple of months. But just to have a good idea of where you think you would need the funds to get this done. And then with Nexus, I know this one's your area. Go for it.
Just jump in on that
Go
one.
right ahead.
So You may have heard about how Nexus and MICIP, we're working towards some sort of integration between the two. This is not one of the things that will integrate with that. So this is truly just for planning purposes. And like Hilda mentioned, we're really supposed to be thinking about, if this is a 3-year goal, over the 3 years, how much do we think might need to be dedicated to this, and what are some different ways that we might fund it? And so this is truly just for conversation and planning. So at some point that MICIP and Nexus are connected for the consolidated application, it's not going to pull this funding over. Like Hilda mentioned, the MICIP police aren't going to come in their jackboots and drag you away if the things that you say on this funding doesn't match what you put in the consolidated application. It's really, truly there to just start a conversation about what are some ways that we might fund this and how much money are we talking about.
Exactly. All right, so step 14, you've done all the work, at least on the platform. You now have a goal, you have a strategy, you have activities to get the work done, you have a way to pay for it. Now it's time to communicate this plan. And so really, you're going through here before you hit that print button, because remember, there's no submit. How will this plan be communicated? And so it's really asking you, what's the plan, the communication plan, and then who are you sharing it with? Who's your intended audience? And you can see, are you doing it, just posting it to your district website? Are you sending it out in an email blast? Is it going to be presented at a school board meeting? Will it be on social media? Whatever method you choose, you have that option there. And then who will the audience be? Okay? Remember, it's crucial that this plan be shared. It shouldn't just be housed on MICIP and forgot about. So you really are thinking about, okay, is this something that we want to share with the community? Is it really intended for our parents? Is it for our school board, for our district, for our staff? So just being cognizant of that is really important. And then, yeah, this is not the submit button. I promise you, there is no submit. But when you're all done, with at least where you're at in the process, you hit add to MICIP platform. And what that does is it kind of just puts it all together. Thinking back to TurboTax, right? It takes all the different pieces and puts it into a nice PDF platform format, and then you have it accessible. This way, when you want to communicate it, it's ready to go. If you do need to upload it for whatever needed, a grant here or there, you have it available. But that's where the MICIP portfolio, and then you have the option to go through and select which components you want to share as well.
I think that's it for Hilda's part.
That's it for me.
All right. So, we are kind of trying to get through this afternoon part a little bit quicker so that we can get into the actual platform and do a live demo of a few things. So, but I do have a few things, additional pieces that I want to talk about once it's in the platform. We are really going to be spending the 3 sessions that we have planned for this year for the collaboration series is really after it's in the platform. So we're really going to be digging into the implementation, monitoring, and adjusting. We wanted to just give a quick overview of that, and we're going to be going into a lot greater detail with that, and we're going to have districts that are kind of come in and share examples about those. So we're going to just kind of quickly go through this part and share just a few pointers. And then we do want to spend some time answering questions from our Slido. There was a lot of technical questions in there that we wanted to get to, and we think probably getting in and doing a live demo in the actual platform will be the best way to do that. One thing that I wanted to point out is when some folks are saying, how many goals do we need, and are we just supposed to have 1 goal? I heard that we're supposed to have 2 goals, and really wanted to clear that up. There is not a certain amount of goals that you are being held to have in MICIP. So it has been designed so that you can have the amount of goals that make sense for your district. We showed several of those on that colorful flow charts earlier. In some cases, it's going to make sense to have 1 goal. In other cases, maybe it'll make sense to have 3 or 4. Nobody's going to come in and say, well, I see you only have 1 goal. That's not enough. You need to go back and make another goal. There aren't a certain amount of goals that you need to have. And so what you do need to have in there, and it's outlined in these 2 memos here, you need to have anything that you are actively working on and want to be funding, then you need to at least be able to say the goal or goals that you have written covers those things. And so the memos kind of outline what that means. And so back in 2022, we talked about in that school year that we needed to have all of our active goals there. And to help with that, we're kind of in the middle of a in-between spot. To help with that, you could actually take things that were back from assist and you could turn them into limited maintenance goals. So I do not suggest anybody trying to go in and making any limited maintenance goals right now. I wanted to bring this up though, because if you do have any limited maintenance goals, those are going to become archived. And so at this point, if you do have limited maintenance goals, you should be talking to your team to say, are we either going to archive these goals, or is this still important to us? If it is, then you should really take it through the data discovery process and look at your data again and make sure that those goals are still important. So if you're just taking over in this position and maybe somebody else is working on this before, take a look in your portfolio and see if you have any of these limited maintenance goals. And if you do, you need to start with your team asking, okay, was this still an important goal for us? If it is, then you're going to want to go through the data discovery process and get it added as a regular goal. So this is a piece of homework for everybody, is to take a look in your portfolio and see if any of them are limited maintenance goals, because those won't last in the portfolio forever. Yep.
You're putting in our questions in Slido. I'm trying to answer those, so check back if I was able to answer your question.
Yeah, so we are trying to do some live answers of the Slido, and then we will do more Q&A at the end. But yes. Yeah, I think it's at the end of the 2024. Yeah, is when those are going to go away. Again, I'm sure there'll be good communication, and they won't just disappear. So at worst, they get archived. But now is a good time to start thinking about are they still important to us? If so, then we should probably go through the whole process and identify our data stories and those sorts of things. Frank, was that in this memo? Yep, all plans. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is back. This is the, yeah. I'm thinking it's the 2024. Yep. All right. Okay, so just wanted to kind of give a summary of the things that we talked about before lunch and the things that we've talked about after lunch. But like we've mentioned many times, that whole child data that we upload at the very beginning of the process, we're going to use that to make our end targets and interim targets. All of that data discovery that we do and when we're working on our data stories, and then the root cause analysis, whether we use the 5 whys or fishbone or any other method, that really informs those challenge statements and the goals. And then those strategy critical components, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, become a monitoring plan. And any activities that you make, you're able to use those to evaluate how you're moving forward. So I'm going to give you some tools that we can use to do some of those items there. And I put a little asterisk on those last 2 items. Those are things that we're going to be really digging into quite heavily at our collaboration series. So if you remember, I think, is it on this? Oh, it's not. Oh, sorry. I can't back up on this. Can you go back? Thanks, Frank. The graph will show up again with the big green part about implement, monitor, and adjust. But really, when we think about that planning part, everything that we've talked about so far is just getting your plan written. But the bulk of the work is around this. We're putting the plan into place. We're monitoring the work that we're doing, and we're making adjustments. And then eventually, we'll get to evaluating that plan when we get toward the end of the time frame that we had established. But the big bulk of the work is implementing, monitoring, and making adjustments. So this was pulled out of the process guide, and it makes it look like, so this is the whole process from beginning to end, and it kind of makes it look like it's either equal or that maybe even more time gets spent on the assessed needs. But like what we talked about before, it really looks more like this. And so just know that if you're spending a lot of time just looking at data and figuring out what we need and writing your plan and not a lot of time putting that plan into place, then you have a little bit of a mismatch for kind of where the time should be spent. So wanted to quickly go into this. Again, this is going to be what we're really digging into at our collaboration series. But what does it really mean to implement? And the first thing is that we really want to agree on what it is that we're doing. And and we can do that through writing our goals and selecting our strategies. That's really where we're figuring that out. And then agreeing on the practices, processes, the materials. A lot of those are going to be your activities. So spending a lot of good time selecting strategies that are really actionable and activities that you can put into place is spending the time at the beginning of it so that you know what to put in place is good. So then what professional development do you need? What processes are you going to put into place? Agreeing how we're going to do it, and then making sure that we have the time set aside. So those are all the things that we need to do to be able to actually implement something. And then once we are out and putting that into place, we need to monitor that we're putting it into place. So I have a couple of resources that I want to share. Frank, if you could maybe just click on the first one there. And I would like to give credit to Ben for this, and also Lisa Asaro. This was something that they developed years and years and years and years and years ago. And I remember going to a PD really early in my career as a principal that Ben was leading at Kent ISD. He was at Kent ISD at the time. And he shared this resource and the next one that I'm going to show. And it like changed the trajectory of my career. So, and it really got me thinking about the level of detail that is actually required to do continuous improvement. So, you know, kind of up to that point, I was really on the, okay, we need to update our plan once a year, and then I'll think about that plan again next year. And this really got me thinking about anything that we select, we really need to get detailed about how we're going to put it into place. And so for whatever strategy that we select, whether it's MTSS or a guaranteed viable written curriculum or professional learning communities, whatever that was that we're going to select, we really have to think about what are the critical components that will make that strategy actually work for us. And a lot of times, the research around that strategy will help you understand what those critical components are. And then with your team, you really need to decide what's the gold standard for this. I've also heard this called must-dos, but that's really what does that look like for us when we are putting this critical component in place? What does that look like for us? And then sometimes there can be acceptable variations around that, and there's always an unacceptable variation. So those might be practices that have been in place before that we want to make sure that we're not doing. But really spending the time with the team to identify whatever the strategy that we're putting into place, what are the critical components, and what are the gold standards for what that's going to look like. And then Frank, if you could pop open that other document. Hit the zoom button down at the bottom there a couple times. So what this does is it really helps us to think about how are we going to monitor the implementation of those critical components. So if maybe a critical component around a reading new curricular resource that you're putting into place is that you have to spend at least 15 minutes a day using their phonemic awareness routines. So if that was what our critical component was, 15 minutes around the phonemic awareness routines, then we would say what our gold standard was. You know, so we might say our gold standard is something like the teacher is using the routines, the teacher has the flashcards out for the students to use, the teacher is spending at least 15 minutes a day on this, right? So we really sit down and we think with our staff, what does it really look like to put this into place? So then under how, you might list out the different resources that they need. The who is who's monitoring or who is monitored. So in this case, the teachers would be getting monitored to see if they're putting this into place. And then who is monitoring? That might be a coach, it might be the principal, it might do peer monitoring. So how often are we going to do that monitoring? And then how are we going to communicate about that? So when I was a principal, we put this into place. In that specific example that I had, we bought a new curriculum, new curricular resource, and we really wanted to do a really good job at kindergarten and first grade with the phonemic awareness implementation. And so we used this to decide how we were going to monitor it, and we started off doing self-monitoring, and then we went into peer monitoring. But no matter how we were monitoring it, when we got together for our monthly meetings, we would share the monitoring data, And we were really able to see, geez, at the start of the year, we were only getting to this 3 days a week when we agreed that this was a 5-day-a-week thing. And then so we could bury or bust around why this was only happening 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. So we really got detailed around the strategy and really dug into that to see, and we monitored it very closely on very small improvement scale cycles so that we could actually see that improvement in a couple of months instead of over a couple of years. So,
Hey, Dave.
yes.
And also that you were just talking about that monitoring data. That's another one of those pieces of data that's processed data that you can layer back in later on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. The voice from above came. So I don't want to spend too much time on those two resources, but I can't say enough how much they changed the way that I approach continuous improvement. And so we always make sure that to spend a lot of time at those and give lots of examples around those. Now in my current role, I work as the continuous improvement consultant for Muskegon Area ISD, and I work with a lot of our districts on putting those into place. And it's funny to watch that, to see them put that in place at the start. We get kind of eye rolls about, really, do we really need to write down that this is 15 minutes and we agree that we're going to do it 15 minutes 5 days a week? It's like, yes, get to that level of detail. And then to see after just a couple of months that people come back and they say, we've seen change happen in just a couple of months that we don't usually see happen over several years. So it's all about the level of detail. And so that's really what we're talking about when we get to implement. You have to get really detailed about those different items. And so I'm just going to kind of touch on monitoring because I kind of let the cat out of the bag on a couple of those items. But I do want to point out that we have another tool, and Frank, if you wouldn't mind popping that open. This is something that Frank and Mike really worked really hard on. And Frank, maybe you could just talk into this one a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So Mike and I, a year ago, when we were preparing for this particular session at the conference, and realized that we didn't have any tremendous tools to work with around monitoring, nor did we really have any good examples. And so he and I sat down over the winter and started going through this and taking a look at, well, what are the 4 components of monitoring? We have impact, which kind of is its own area that's tied to the interim and end targets. And then you have these other components, fidelity, capacity, and scale, which are under the little monitoring note tools. You might notice they're also parts of the hex tool that you've seen earlier. So that hex tool can be useful in a couple of different settings as you go through. It's not just hey, let's do it and use it right away and be done with it. But as you go through this particular document, it will walk you through, for example, impact has its own piece here, and that's tied to the targets. And then under your implementation, using implementation science, you're going to look at fidelity, scale reach, and capacity. And then as you dig into the MICIP platform, you will have a place to capture the notes. Hilda brought up earlier the idea that you can get qualitative and quantitative data in your monitoring notes. So this becomes a place where you and your team can capture those conversations, or you can capture the highlights of conversations. So if you are measuring fidelity, you might measure that once a year or so, maybe a couple times a year. You might look at scale and reach. That might be something that if you're implementing, let's say, Dave's example of phonemic awareness, maybe we're implementing that at first grade, and after 6 months, we want to check and see the scale. Are we ready to scale this up now to include potentially kindergarten? In a little bit of pre-work, are we ready to scale that to the 2nd grade for what their piece may be? So you can look at these as you're implementing to what makes the most sense. The third one here, capacity, a lot of times that will be initial. Do we have the capacity to make this strategy happen? And if we don't have the capacity initially, it doesn't necessarily mean that we give up the strategy. It just might mean we have a little more pre-work to do before we can really get into the implementing of it. And then that last one here, the impact, and that's going to be where you're going to have a little bit of qualitative, but you're probably going to have a little more quantitative data that's going to tie back to your original data story. So as you're monitoring, you're continuing to look at those data components from the original part of the assessed needs and say, are we moving the needle on these parts? All right, now Mike, as I'm looking at this document, is there a link to our sample? First page. A little louder? Ah, there we go. Okay, so this is the example Mike and I made up. In my former life, I've got many years of working with PBIS and PBIS scale-up, so this was the example that we came up with. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're going to zoom this in just a little bit for you. That way we can see. There we go. Okay, so here's this exact same document, only this time it's in pink and it says PBIS example. So we started, Mike and I said, well, what would be a sample goal around this? So we came up with a whole child goal. We came up with a sample strategy. We came up with some sample activities. And you can see that here on the first page in the box. And then we said, okay, what would that look like to monitor these particular areas? And so MICIP, when you do a monitoring notes, it timestamps who went in and did it. It timestamps the date for you. And so we made a couple of sample notes. So for example, under fidelity, on August 22nd, back in 2022, all buildings shared their SWIS and TFI data analysis calendar with the district. That was a first activity step. And then the next time that I monitored fidelity was several months later in February 16th. This gave us the, take a look at that monitoring of implementation guide that Dave showed you, that little chart. And we had a little bit of data. Hey, 7 of our 10 sample teachers had taught those lessons at that point. So these become, again, process pieces. They're process data that we build right directly into MICIP. A little further down, if you want to see an example on scale and reach. Here's one. This was a couple months after that initial implementation. We said 4 out of our 5 buildings reported that they had all the necessary components. Okay, so I mean, that's good data. It tells you where people are at. And then we also had the note of, well, one building is still finalizing a couple of their components. Okay, so we were able to keep track of where everybody is. And then, just not even 2 months later, all 5 buildings completed their PBIS kickoff. So again, that's a piece looking at the scale and reach. Here's one around capacity. Okay, on December 14th, everybody was trained from a local ISD partner. And then by January 30th, those school leadership teams, they had subsequently trained all of their staff at their various buildings. So those are those 3 that kind of fit in with that implementation side. And then we said, well, what might some impact notes look like? So these are ones these were ones we did at the end of the year. So it's, on June 12th, maybe this is the last day of school or the last day the school leadership team met. We said, yeah, they shared their TFI data from January and May. And we had, the team selected 2 growth areas. 5 out of the 5 buildings shared that they had moved at least from a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 2. And then same day, we looked at SWIS data, and we said, well, 2 out of the 5 showed a decrease in office referrals. 2 out of 5 stayed the same. Oh, well, we had one building that slightly increased. Is it wrong to say that, our data didn't move the way it needed to? No, this helps us with that adjust as we go through and look at our plans. Sometimes you got to do a course correction. We did make a note that the one building who did increase slightly, it was noted that we had a few staff that seemed resistant. So this may be a point that the building principal gets a chance to go in and work with some staff around how do we get on board with this process. And so, these are all components that we can put in to the monitoring notes. In this case, yeah, most of it's narrative. It's all qualitative data, but it's still good data. It's process data. And, quite honestly, process data is the one area of data that we have the most control over as educators. We can control the processes. Can't always control the outcomes. Can't always control the demographics. In fact, we very rarely can control the demographics. But, we can control the processes we put in place and then how we're doing. And then if they're working or if they're not working, what do we do next? So some good examples there. Again, this the monitoring doc and then the sample here. And, these are all there for you to harvest any ideas you want off of that. Is that good, Dave?
Yeah, and I hope that shows kind of talking about what we're talking about with implementation and then the monitoring, how that becomes that big green part of the pie. And that kind of work that Frank's talking about takes time. It takes getting together and looking and talking. And so those are the sorts of things that happen at our district or school improvement meetings.
That was the pie you were referring
Frank
to?
Frank and I were fighting over the controls there for a second. All right, so this is one of our last slides, and this is, I think, a pretty important one. If we want to get to those socially significant outcomes, which is why we're in this business, we want to change lives, we want to change the directions of our communities, and that's what we mean when we say socially significant outcomes. You really need three main things. You do need those effective practices, so you need to select the right thing. Okay, so you need to put great things in place that are research-based, that are going to make a difference. But hopefully we've been able to shine the light on you really need that effective implementation to be able to put that effective practice in place. And then this last piece is about that enabling context. And that was what we started the day with today, was talking about that enabling context, making sure that you have the right team, the right people on the team, and you're looking at the right data. So if you don't have all three of those things, you may see some sort of progress. It might be very slow, but you won't see that socially significant outcomes that we're really shooting for. So you need all three of those things. And we'll notice that it is a multiplication problem, and we all know that anything times 0 is 0. So we need all three of those items. And so we tried to, below each of those items, kind of say where in the MICIP process do we see effective practice, effective implementation, and that enabling context. Okay, so with that, I'm going to have Hilda log in. We did have a lot of kind of technical type questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? Came through on the Slido. Hilda is going to go ahead and log in. Hopefully it'll answer some of those kind of questions. And if there's anything that we don't get answered and you have some real specific questions, then we'll all kind of hang around afterward during the transition to answer any additional questions. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to
I think we're
Hilda.
up. Okay, so we're going to do our best to show you what it actually looks like on the platform. Like Dave said, we had a bunch of questions about just accessing the site, and then once you're there, getting permissions updated, so we'll try to show you that, and then give you an overview of what it actually looks like when you're uploading the various parts that we referenced today in our presentation. So when you do go to micip.org, you're going to see two options. Pretty much majority of us in this room would go under the My Launchpad. The one on the left there is for our MDE staff, so that's not us. So we'll stick to the one on the right. If you'll go there, please. Next, well, remember, MICIP is connected with the My Data Hub, and so you need to search for your district. So yeah, if you'll type in Dearborn, I think it should come up there. And the reason I can log in now without actually putting in a username or sign in is because I've signed into my Google account. So I'm verified in that way. Just make sure that you are the user signing in, and then it'll update your permissions and let you in at that sense. I wonder if we can like zoom the screen a little bit. So if you click on those dots, there you go, a little bit. All right. So I mentioned earlier that Dearborn has one goal. We went back and forth on this. And at one point, we were at 3, 4 goals, 5 goals, because, we were going from the same mindset of what we had back in Assist, which, every subject area had its own goal, and you went through the process, and that's how we did things. And in hindsight, we started to recognize that, this is not what we want. This is not what we envision. And so if we're thinking continuous improvement, we went with more of a systems goal. And our systems goal, so if you'll click on that little plus sign, I think right where it says improve academic, there you go, I think it'll open it up for us. So improve academic achievement and growth for all students really is our goal. Like we mentioned earlier, very broad. And that's going to happen through a high graduation rate, meet our annual proficiency and growth targets, pre-K through 12, and making sure that it's all set by the state accountability system. So we're truly trying to align all of the expectations, all the accountability pieces, all into one area. The way it's going to happen is we have some strategies. The first one being our MTSS framework. That is the first, our big umbrella, really, what we do everything underneath there. And you can see the wording of the strategy details. That came from the My Strategy Bank, right? Going that route, so that's where it comes from. You'll see the person on the right there, the strategy owner. That would be one of our executive directors of student achievement, Fatima Faraj, so her name is there. And then the start and end date. All of our schools, this applies district-wide, so you can see all of our schools are listed there. A long list. And now we're into our strategies and activities. And can you click on one? Let's try that first one. Yeah, guaranteed and viable curriculum. Does it expand? No, we don't want to do that. Hit cancel. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, no, don't want to do that.
So you actually can't dig in at the
No.
screen. You can't expand those out. You have to actually go back to the goal screen to look at them in further detail.
Yeah, let's go. I'd like to show one, so if we can go up to the top and show you how we got. So I guess let's do each of the drop downs. If you go over one first to Discover so they can see what we did. So under Discover is where you'll add your data. So let's click on that and they can see. And you can see we have there our, looking at that, yeah, our data story there. We did start a second data story last spring. That one's still evolving. So it hasn't resulted in a goal yet. We're just still developing it. But that first one there, let's go to that first one, the academic one. Oh, sorry if you go back. There you go. Yeah, that one, let's go to that one. And then you can see the various data points. I know the question of how often do I add data came up a couple of times. We did update with some new data points that came out from this past summer, some of our new summative assessments. You cannot actually see them here because these were PDFs that we uploaded. So you'd actually have to click on it and it opens up in a separate browser window. If you were pulling from My School Data or Munetrics or whatever, that way I think it would show on there. So yeah, various data sets are there. If you'll click on Analyze at the bottom, I think then it goes to the next step. And so with each part it goes through and you can see we have there. I love the top part where it says District Data Story. It brings you back to the previous screen so you can see, and then it lets you know where you're going forward with the root cause analysis, so you always know where you are in the process. We have our fishbone there. It just shows you the graphic of the fishbone, but if you actually want to see the one that we developed, I think we uploaded one that we created on a template. So if you scroll down, I think you'll be able to see it. And so there's the analysis. Is it there? Yep, that's it. Yeah, and there's our fishbone, and that was a PDF fillable that we worked on and that our district MICIP team developed. A lot of this work, like we said, is done with our district MICIP team that we meet with regularly once a month, and then we have a smaller subgroup based on our district structure of instructional cabinet, non-instructional, and we always get their voices involved because definitely having the various stakeholders in the process is huge. And so you can see there we have the causal factors that I believe Frank mentioned before, and we have there as our fishbone. Will this get updated, a new one possibly? Yes. I mean, again, like I said, there's no submit. You're continuously reflecting. You're looking at what our new needs are, and then you would adapt and move from there. Beautiful. Next step. Yes, please. Let's see. So let's go now to, if you hit Analyze, I think at the bottom there.
Oh, I went the wrong way.
That's okay.
Define challenge.
Yes, please. And so then we developed our challenge statement. And so from there we look, based on what we learned from our 5 whys, based on what we learned from the fishbone activity that we did, we identified what the need was at the district. And can you read that, Frank? I can't even see it.
Just barely.
Sorry. Yeah,
Sure.
Frank can see better than I can.
Yep, it says the district allocates resources to develop a system to implement PLC and MTSS. However, there is a need to strengthen professional development district-wide to develop consistency. The district needs to strengthen the PLC's process district-wide by implementing both specifically designed instruction for subgroups and a well-documented MTSS process.
Thank you, sir. So I mentioned earlier that professional learning communities was a vehicle that we recognized that would get us to the goal. And so we invested heavily with professional development, with strengthening that time, the way the teams worked, having expectations that were set for them to help us get to address this challenge. So now it was time to define the goal.
Can you talk about briefly
Yeah.
the initiative inventory in terms of focusing on each?
Oh, yeah. So with so many buildings, thank you, Frank. So our initiative inventory, not only at our district level, but then when we met with all of our building and leadership teams, we reflected heavily on what was in place, what was working, what was not. And so that initiative inventory was huge. It was an eye-opener, especially for our building administrators, in looking at what have we been doing? We have all these great strategies, we have all these wonderful initiatives, but if they're not giving us the results that we want, then why are we still doing them? And I'm always going back to the data, going to the results, and thinking, how can we be strategic? How can we be smarter? And so that's where we went. And then we defined our goal. We, again, tried to be as broad as possible, maintain a high graduation rate, and meet annual proficiency in growth targets in pre-K through 12th as set by the state accountability systems. Name the goal, very short title there. We have our impact measures, so we've got that. We've got those all there. I believe we went with a quantitative. Yes, we have a quantitative goal there, and then we have some interim targets as well, and then our strategies. So we have 3 strategies. I think that you can open. Yes. So the MTSS framework, we believe heavily that having a strong Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, in particular Tier 1, will address the needs of our district and our students and get them to where they need to be. And so having that framework, that giant umbrella under a multi-tiered system of supports was what we chose as our main strategy. It fit the need based on the hexagon tool. You can see there that it really provided us what we wanted. Remember, the rating is really based on the discussion. There's no right or wrong answer here. Yeah. Yeah, at the point, yeah, the capacity was only at a 2. And I feel that in hindsight now, I think we've worked very clearly, and I see Fatmi in the room here, we've been very cognizant in terms of staffing, in terms of what we had in place to make sure we got to how we can go. So I would hope it's higher than a 2 now. But at the time, we were definitely, it was one of our lower areas that we know we needed to be more careful of. Thank you. Yep, you can go ahead and... There we go. Did it click? That's okay. Okay, so if you scroll down. I know we had a couple of questions, and then there's our activities. So there's the buildings it's assigned to. And then we get into the activities. Remember, those are the actions that adults will do. So you'll see there, our MTSS strategy has an academic component to it, and it has an affective component to it. So because we were looking at the whole child, thinking of our social emotional learning needs, and that was pre-COVID, and then definitely most heavily after COVID as well. And we've also taken into consideration not just the students in the room, but also the adults in the room to make sure that we are giving everyone the support that they need. So you'll see there from that list that we have various surveys that we administer, different data points that align to help us collect information to make sure that we are getting the data that we need to make sure that it's getting accomplished in a timely manner. Oh, no, it's fine, yeah. And then, if you update plan. If you scroll down a little bit more, though, I want to show 2 of the new. And then, yeah, you can see our funding sources. I know someone asked about how much to put. We put them up approximately $3 million, and then we checked off, nothing, right? And then how will it be communicated, just like I mentioned there. And then if you keep going. So we did add 2 new strategies this morning. Not this morning, sorry. I was asked about this morning. We did add 2 new strategies most recently, and a lot of you probably have asked about this as well. One being 23G, the grant that is coming out soon, and it's supposed to be somehow communicated through the documents that we have here in MICIP. So if you want to click on one of them. These strategies actually came from the strategy bank. They do align with what we currently had in place under our MICIP plan, which was pretty, consistent with what our needs are. With the first one, we were doing expanded learning time, so we're recognizing having tutoring before school or after school, possibly something in the summer, and then aligning which buildings that would be tagged with. And then the second, I believe, was focused on our high school students. And that was, the intensive individualized support. And there we were really thinking about the EDP, the individualized, EDP. Why am I drawing a blank? the career awareness for
Educational
students.
development plans?
Thank you. Education Development Plan. All these acronyms. Making sure that our high schoolers have a plan upon graduation, whether it be a trade school, college, or vocational school, something that they know that we have. And so we were looking at with our graduation specialists and with the different interventionists that we have at the high school to ensure that they have the plan in place. So that is that for what our plan looks like. Real quick, if you scroll up to the top, I just want to show how to add users, because I know we were asked that. If you'll click on my name. So there are various roles. I think you go to administrative settings, yeah. So there are various roles within the MICIP platform. You can be a viewer. You could be someone that I can actually input data or information into it, or you can be have the administrative credentials. And so I think if you user management is where I want to show them. Yes. And so personally, I'm one of the administrative users at our district level. So I have the ability to go in, and if we have a new building principal or someone that is at central office that needs the ability to go in and view what's on MICIP, we would be able to do that. And you would just put in their credentials and would add them. I'm trying to think what else.
So Hilda, can I
Yeah,
jump in here?
please go ahead.
Frank, could you go to the dashboard real quick?
Oh, yeah.
And then scroll to the second page of the dashboard. So many of you here might be, you may be new into your position and you need to be the person that's administering MICIP, but you aren't. There's nobody at your district that can make you a MICIP administrator. So on the second page of our dashboard, if this is you, if you need to be somebody that can administer users and you don't currently have that role, then you need to follow the directions that are on the second page there under Assign a MICIP Administrator. So basically it means mostly going to this My Service Help Desk and saying so-and-so left, I'm in a position I need to be the MICIP Administrator, and then they'll help you out with that. And then if for some reason you're not able to still get connected there, then Rennie is gonna be your best friend. So Rennie was doing check-ins for us at the desk this morning, and he's really on top of this kind of stuff, so his email address is in there if you have any problems with that.
I just recently had this come up as somebody had left the curriculum director position at a local school. New person stepped in. She already happened to be in the system, so I impersonated her, deactivated her, and then Rennie could make her the district administrator. So there's a few little bugs to it, but just a little bit of patience and time, it'll happen.
It is important if you are one of the administrative personnel that oversees this in your district, just to clean it up maybe once a year for staff that come and go. District our size with the number of buildings we have, if you'll go back to that screen, you'll notice we have quite a few viewers. So we want our building principals to be able to log into MICIP. They can see the plan. They can interact with it in some way or shape, but they are not the ones going in, adding or deleting anything. And so most of them are, you'll see our district viewers on there, our user, that's it. So they can't break it, because that's always a fear. That's
Hilda, there was a question in the Slido about if you could maybe just kind of go into the thought process or how your district was able to get down to that one goal, how you were able to get such a large and diverse district.
We went back and forth. We
one
were
goal.
really big. The initiative inventory actually helped in looking at really what was it that we wanted to accomplish. And we recognized that we have 20,000 plus students. We have our subgroups, our EL population, our SE population. We have needs that we know. A third of our staff is revolving door. You know, just like with our 1,500 teachers, at least a third of them have less than 5 years of teaching experience. So we recognized there was lots of things going on. What could we do that would help us get to where we needed to be? And one of them was that whole idea of recognizing that with the academic and focusing in on, like I said, that tier 1 and ensuring that we had a guaranteed and viable curriculum, making sure that we were addressing the needs of all of our students in there. But with the academic, if a student walks into your room and they're not academically prepared to, if they're not mentally prepared to listen and to learn and engage, there's no way the academic was going to happen. And so we were very careful about having the affective and the academic go hand in hand as our two two pieces, our two strategies, because we felt that was the heart of it. That like, if they weren't mentally and emotionally prepared, they couldn't learn. And so that was our thinking.
So we do just have a couple of minutes. Could we maybe just do a little wrap up? But just know that if you had a question that either didn't get answered through the demo or we weren't able to answer back in the Slido, that all four of us are available kind of in the transition. So just I want to point out one other thing on the dashboard, Frank, if you go to the second page again. That there is a MICIP training site. So if you're like, I want to get in there and try things, I want to like try making some of this stuff before you actually go into your MICIP plan, there is a training site and anybody can log into that. And so the directions on how to do that is there. And it actually, you can go in there and do anything that you want because at midnight every night it blows it all away and it starts a whole new fresh day. And there's always a fresh like pretend goal in there that you can even experiment with. So like if you don't feel like making a whole goal to just try the monitoring section, there'll be a pretend one in there that you can go in and you can try monitoring and you can close it out and you can evaluate it and you can do all that kind of stuff because the next day it'll just start over fresh again. So if you want to kind of experiment with all of that, there is that training site that's on the second page. So I want to point that out.
I was going to say, and watch out with that with the training site. It's a fabulous place to go play and explore and learn. You cannot be signed into your Google account, though, when you do that, because like you notice, because otherwise it's going to confuse your district plan with that. So you need to be in a guest or an incognito window.
Follow the directions.
Follow the directions.
Open an incognito window.
Yeah.
And then Frank, could you pop back over to the presentation, please? So we're just going to kind of close things out. If you could pop back one slide there. There you go. Just one last plug for our MICIP collaboration series. That QR code is the registration link for that. And the registration link's also on our dashboard. So we have the dates there. We have January, March, and May dates for that. And that is what that registration link is toward. But like Ben mentioned at the general session today, that there is also the user group that just gets together for an hour. And there is no registration for that. The link for how to connect to that is in the continuous communication that Ben puts out monthly. So just wanted to put one last plug in for the collaboration series. We're going to be spending all 3 of those days on that whole implement, monitor, and adjust that we kind of quickly moved through this afternoon.
We also added the link to get on that MICIP listserv that comes out monthly.
Yeah,
that
that's
is
what I was
also
gonna
on our dashboard for today.
Yeah, it's a great newsletter that Ben works on. I mean, it's very concise. If there's any new news, he puts that on there, links to things that are going on, whatever documents have been updated. So, yep, I added that there. So definitely sign up for that. It comes out once a month.
All right, so with that, we are going to wrap up the session. Thank you for spending most of the day with us. And if anybody has any questions that we might, some real specific questions, we are here during the transition time.